Hey, good morning. It's Luminara Serdar with Autism Transformed, where we help kids shift autism behaviors through proper nutrition and gentle detoxification. And today I am talking about, excuse me, tantrums, defiance, and meltdowns, and this is so common in kids on the spectrum. I hear from parents a lot about this. So parents have told me he cries, screams, tantrums, is angry or uncontrollable anger for no reason for long periods of time. He becomes very upset when told no and things don't go his way. And the family ends up revolving their whole lives, special food, mindful of which activities they can go out to because it's good or bad for their child, and causes lots of stress and lost sleep. And parents are constantly researching solutions on the internet. I bet you can relate to that one. And parents tell me many of these behaviors make it very difficult to think and stay calm and rational in the household. So it not only affects the child, but it also takes a toll on parents. And it's super challenging, especially when you're out and your child goes into a full tantrum mode and cannot be consoled. My son had a lot of tantrums, and so I'm very familiar with the tantrums and meltdowns thing. Hasn't happened in a long time because my son's 26, but when he was younger, definitely. And the thing I want to say about these behaviors is that they're a signal from your child's body. I don't think kids want to melt down. It's not fun. It takes a lot of energy. I don't think kids really want to be defiant, even if you see that maybe you think that defiance is on purpose. And I think kids would love to be happy and feel good in their bodies instead of tantruming and melting down and being defiant and always saying no and, having those mean characteristics or tendencies. So let's get into why this might be happening in a child. I said it's a signal from your child's body that there's something happening. What is it? So one of the most common things is, I'll just start generally. Nutrient deficiencies can create these behaviors, but also toxicities. And that all kind of comes back to brain inflammation. So it could be a signal of what's going on in the brain, what it's lacking, or what there's too much of. And in those situations, we have to look at what's inside the body that's causing it. So for instance, mercury or aluminum or glyphosate or some of these very common toxins, arsenic. I see kids really high in these levels, and this can affect the brain, how the brain works and how the brain develops. And then the lack of nutrients, they can be missing key B vitamins, they can be missing key minerals, they could have an overload of copper. So there's a lot that could be going on inside the brain, and if you never investigate, you don't know, and then you don't know which way to shift the biochemistry. If we do some analysis and some testing, we have an idea, there's copper overload, or there's not enough folinic acid. And so we can take a step in to correct that. So brain inflammation is super common, and I already mentioned a couple things, but aluminum, we're exposed to aluminum a lot, especially in childhood injections or any injections we may get that are supposed to keep us healthy. Fluoride is, there's a lot of research now on how fluoride can affect the brain. Mercury, of course. If mom had an infection while pregnant, there's things like PDBEs, it's flame retardants. Bromine is also, think of all the chemicals that are in the bed that we spend, a third of our lives in. Those can really affect the brain. And then I'm seeing more and more lead, cadmium, arsenic, and other metals. And I'll tell you how we're getting those in a second. And then, of course, when mom is pregnant with the child, the umbilical cord is the direct access to putting toxins in the fetus. There was a 2004 study done by the Environmental Working Group called 10 Americans, where cord blood of 10 babies was analyzed, and there were over 287 chemicals in there. So mom gets pregnant, and the body's like, wow, trash bag, let's put these chemicals in here. And so the baby gets loaded. So if mom had mercury fillings, or if you live near a pesticide sprayed field, that could all contribute. And now this isn't to make you feel guilty as mom when you're pregnant. This is just to create awareness and say, oh, well, there's things we can investigate and we can do something about it. So what I wanted to say is Moms Across America, that's an organization headed up by Zen Honeycutt, has recently done some investigations. This organization is the one that initially found glyphosate in breast milk. I think it was over 90%. I don't remember the number because that study was done a while ago, but they did find in 100% of fast food samples, there were heavy metals like lead and cadmium. So the top 20 fast food restaurants, their food had glyphosate, 100% had glyphosate, and then other pesticides, and 100% tested for heavy metals. And they found antibiotics in the top 10 fast food samples. So that would probably be coming from the animals that were used in that meat. And they found extremely low nutrient availability. There's hardly any nutrients in fast food. So if you're still eating fast food, I'm going to suggest or invite you to stop and to eat at home, where you can control a little bit better what food is put on the table. So that was fast food. And then there was a school lunch test that they did, and they tested 43 school lunch samples. 93% of the school lunches contained carcinogens, endocrine disrupting chemicals, liver disease causing glyphosate. 74% of the samples contained at least one of 29 different pesticides. So different people use different pesticides, but they're all kind of nasty, and there are known neurotoxins for the insects and for the weeds. There were 4 veterinary drugs and hormones found in 9 school lunches. So, you don't want to be sending your child to school and having them have extra antibiotics and hormones from the animals. And then 100% of the school lunch samples contain heavy metals at up to over 6,000 times greater than the Environmental Working Group, the EPA, would allow. So this is stuff that, in a fast food meal, you've got the hamburger and the bun and the ketchup and the mustard and, whatever else goes into it. So each of these may contribute different parts of those. And these can create brain inflammation, gut inflammation, besides not being nutritious. It's empty calories. And then this can contribute to those behaviors that I'm talking about, especially if your child is a poor detoxifier. And I find this across the board with kids with autism, that they do not detoxify well. And part of the problem, it's a little bit of a catch-22, part of that problem is that there's toxins sitting on their biochemistry and their machinery that detoxifies. So we have to slowly and methodically and in the right order pull toxins off so that detox machinery starts to work better. We need to give the kids energy, the cells energy, so they can work better. And then we start seeing those behaviors improve. So the other thing I mentioned, excuse me, I had a frog in my throat today. The other thing I mentioned was some nutrient deficiencies, and let me pull up that information. There is a fellow named William Walsh who worked with he has an institute, and he worked with the criminally incarcerated people, and he looked at their nutrient status, and over like 20,000 patients, he found certain subsets of people who were defiant, people who were committed crime acts and had no remorse. He made all these subsets, and what he found nutritionally, depending on the person's biochemistry inside, they were either taking in too much of certain nutrients or not enough of other nutrients. So there's a group he calls overmethylation, and you may have heard of the methylation cycle and how important it is for our detox and for making neurotransmitters, and it feeds into a lot of biochemical reactions in our bodies. So if people overmethylate, that means they do it too fast. They have one set of chemistry, and they can be deficient in one set of nutrients, and then need to supplement with other things like folic acid, B vitamins, and especially B12, and that does something with the neurotransmitters. If people undermethylate, that means they're not so good. You may have heard of the MTHFR mutation, and these people don't have as much of a capacity to methylate, and these people need a different set of a different type of nutrients, and typically they are depleted in certain minerals like magnesium and methionine and vitamin B6. So supplementing with these can really help with that subset of people, and those people tend to be more obsessive compulsive, and we see this in autism, oppositional defiant disorder. That's how we are calling it these days, or how we're diagnosing it. Seasonal depression. Let me go back to the overmethylated folks. They tend to have, anxiety and depression. And then we can have too many nutrients like copper overload and pyrrole disorder. And a pyrrole disorder means that we use up the vitamin B6 and zinc really fast, so our kids will be deficient in that. And I believe, and there's evidence for the microbiome being a part of this, of why there's pyrrole disorder, why we might have copper overload. Those microbes in our gut, they help us with taking care of these balances in micronutrients and doing, a biochemistry in our body. So they work with us, and we want them to be in synergy. And it's a well-known researched fact that kids on the autism spectrum have less variety of microbes in their gut. And unfortunately, supplementing with probiotics is not the full answer, because you can put good probiotics in and keep putting them in, but if they're not in an environment where they're thriving, they're not going to keep proliferating in the gut. What we want to do is bring the population of the bad bacteria down and the good bacteria up, and make sure there's lots of variety. And one of the ways, unfortunately, we have to do that is through detoxification, because those bad microbes in the gut love to eat our toxins. Parasites love to eat our toxins, so they're kind of doing us a favor, but they create their own set of problems. Okay. And then, of course, our kids on the spectrum don't absorb nutrients very well. It's because of inflammation in the gut, which can, it creates an inflamed state, and the microvilli in the gut that are supposed to absorb the nutrients, they kind of get chewed down, and you don't have as much surface area, and so you don't have as good of absorption. And I've also found in my clinical practice that the more toxic someone is, the more those toxins work as a barrier or a fence, so that even if the food, the nutrients is circulating and reaching the cells may not be able to take it in and utilize it. Okay, So we talked about brain inflammation. We talked about a little bit about gut inflammation. There's so much research on autism and the gut, and one of the main things we can do to help with that is there's a few. One is to stop gluten and dairy. I talked about fast food and all the nasties in fast food earlier. So we can, first of all, just change what we're putting in the body and stop putting toxic stuff in it. It's a challenge. It's like a salmon swimming upstream, but we can do it. I've done it. I know you can do it. It takes a little bit of a rewiring of our brains as parents to say, okay, and willpower in a way. It's like, okay, I'm going to stop fast food. I'm going to buy organic, good food. I'm going to cook at home. And there are so many, there's so much help on the internet for that with recipes. And I would say take a good cooking class. And I took a cooking class with my son when he was 13, and it was a Thai cooking class, and he wanted to cook Thai all the time after that. So if you get your kids involved in a cooking class with you, to the degree that, you can get them interested, that would be great. But so shifting what goes into the body is important. I always feel like things like bone broth are very healing for the gut. Collagen, if you're doing smoothies, I would put collagen, protein powder, from a clean animal. A lot of places take collagen from the hide of an animal. So if you have a cow and you take their hide, you can get a lot of collagen out of that. Unfortunately, if it's a traditional, typically raised animal in a caged feedlot operation, this is where they put the antibiotics on the hide. They put the antibiotics on the back. And so you have to be really careful about what kind of collagen you're getting. You want it from a very clean animal, organic and grass-fed, and ideally not loaded with antibiotics. So bone broth is really healing, and glycine can be really healing. Aloe vera juice can be very healing for the gut. And probiotics can help, but it's not the full solution. So I do recommend that. I love the Just Thrive or the Megaspore, which is a practitioner brand. So what else can be creating these behaviors in our kids? Oh, one more thing I wanted to say that I love to help with the gut or to help with detox is I like binders. So things like activated charcoal, chlorella, GI detox. I use ones that are super, super effective. My parents call it the happy pill because they give this binder. So a binder, let me describe it first. A binder is like a sponge in the gut, and it will hold toxins and not let them go. And so when your child poops, they go out with the poop. But the binders I use, actually some stay in the gut and some circulate around. And so what my parents say, if their child is anxious or stimmy or having behaviors, hyperactive, start kind of getting that angry feeling, they give this binder, and within 15 to 30 minutes, the calm is happening because it's binding toxins in the gut, but it's also binding toxins all around the body because it goes systemic. And I would love to tell everybody about this, but unfortunately you need to be working with a practitioner who is working with these supplements. So it's called biotoxin binder, but you can ask your provider, your health practitioner, if they would use that for you. Okay, so genetics can be a piece of this, and I find more than the genetics, like the fixed genetics that we are born with, it's epigenetics that are creating some of our issues. My degree was in genetics. I worked on the Human Genome Sequencing Project. I'm a little bit familiar with genes and DNA and RNA, and it's kind of in my soul at this point. So I really believe that it is not the genetics we're born with, but it is the epigenetics. And what that means, epi means above the genes. And when we have a toxin, so there can be chemical compounds on the DNA, a nitrogen type compound, an acetyl compound, methyl compound. So there's different chemical moieties or groups that can be on the DNA, and that can stop the expression of the gene, when when we go to make the protein product. So the way it works is you have a gene, you have machinery that makes amino acids, and then those fold into a protein, usually an enzyme, sometimes a structural protein that holds our skin together like collagen, and sometimes an enzyme that will do work like detoxification or change one thing into the final form of a neurotransmitter. So if we have these genetic mutations, we're not getting the reading of the genes, so you're not getting the protein product. But more and more what I found in my practice is that it's not only that the genes, that the DNA has some group on it that prevents it from working well, but it's also the enzyme that was made. So let's say we have a methylation enzyme, and mercury, instead of having molybdenum in the body or manganese or selenium, one of these key minerals, we have a lot of mercury, so that sits on the enzyme and that makes it not work. It's still, the enzyme's there, but the cofactor is the wrong one, and so it won't work well. So again, we need to gently pull these toxins off the enzymes, off the DNA. And if any of you have read Ben Lynch's book, Dirty Genes, he talks all about this, about these genetic mutations, and how when we get cleaner in our diet, cleaner in our living, the effects of those mutations and that toxicity falls away because things start working properly. So that's where I think the genetics piece comes in. So again, there's for these behaviors, I don't think there's any one cause. But as I mentioned, when you constantly have binders, it could be zeolite. I know there's a lot of people that use zeolite that capture heavy metals. It could be fulvic and humic acids. Those will also capture those. It could be very specific chelation techniques that you're using, like EDTA or DMPS or DMSA. Those are for, doctor prescribed, and you have to sit in the doctor's office and do a chelation. You stick a needle in your arm and this compound goes in and it grabs the metals. It's very invasive and it's not fun for a kid, especially someone who doesn't like needles. So I'm just saying there are different ways to pull the metals out, and there are some that are more gentle and some that are more harsh. And it depends on what your child needs. Like, I wouldn't recommend you go do chelation until you did the heavy metal testing and found out, oh, my child's loaded with lead, or my child has uranium. And I've seen all of these numbers really high. Arsenic, cadmium, lead, tin, antimony, these weird things. But, the more we have the production of electronics and waste, and these things are getting into our water, our air, our food, the more we're exposed. So my thought is, let's, do an assessment for your child. Do they have a pural disorder? Do they have high copper? Do they have low magnesium? Do they have, high levels of mercury? So there's ways to do those heavy metal tests. You can use hair, which I don't have much of anymore because I just shaved it. So you can do a hair test, you can do a urine test, or you can do a blood test, and they all give you somewhat different information. None of them is perfect. And then you can also do other diagnostic tests to find toxins. There's mold tests, and this is huge these days. Even if you think your home is dry and has no mold, it's very likely your home can have mold. Schools as well, big institutional buildings. So I like to do mold testing. I like to do heavy metal testing. I like to do environmental chemical testing. So that would test for pesticides, plastics, endocrine disruptors, carcinogens. And again, I've seen, I don't know how kids get this stuff in them, but they have it. So these can all contribute to these behaviors. And for me, I find the simplest way to reduce the behaviors is to start with binders. So that's key. If you don't do anything else, have a binder for your child, and there's just so many different ones. And then obviously test so you know what's in there, so you're using the right binder. If you use chlorella, that can get some microbial toxins, and that can get some heavy metals, but it's not going to get mold, for example. So you want to make sure you're using the right kind of binders, and a healthcare practitioner could help you with that. I could help you with that. We just look inside the body and see what's going on there. So these behaviors, again, it's a signal from your child's body to that something is going on. If your child's tantruming for 2 hours or hits the floor when you say no every time, or you're walking on eggshells, this can change, and it's some kind of disruption inside the body, and that behavior is a signal to you, hey, let's get some testing, let's check the gut microbiome, let's check for inflammation, let's check for toxicity. And so finding out what's in there is going to help you build a strategy to help shift those behaviors, because it's going to give you the next action steps. So if there's nothing you got out of today, it's that you want to consider doing some testing for your child if they've got these behaviors, nutrient deficiencies, too much copper, too many nutrients. We need a delicate, everyone is different and individual, and we need a nice balance of these things in the body to make the right neurotransmitters for brain health, for brain development. And I'll tell you, when I see toxins systematically pulled out of the body, well, the first step is your child has to be pooping every day, right? Because that's eliminating toxins and cellular waste and just the daily waste that the body produces. But what I see, especially when kids start pooping, or when we start really going after pulling the toxins out, I see better eye contact. Some kids have more words. I see the anxiety decrease. I see these kind of behaviors, the meltdowns, tantrums, the defiance decrease. And I see growth. A lot of times we'll see growth spurts in kids, because when you pull the toxins out, they have more energy to grow, literally to grow their skin and bones and organs and their brain. And I also see parents tell me they can't always put a word on it, but their child tends to be a lot more aware, a lot more curious, a lot more interactive. The sensory things go down, having the head touched, the shower on the head, hair being cut, nails being cut, this extra sensory, the how loud sounds are, and even taste buds change. So this sensory things, they all reduce. So I feel like a key is pulling toxins out. And we're all toxic these days. I take binders every day. I will never stop, because I'm constantly exposed through the air, through whatever my food is. Even organic food has stuff in it, through water, even though I drink distilled water, so I purify mine. So I take all the steps, but still we live on this earth that's kind of toxic. And I just feel like we just need to be vigilant, and especially for our kids. Our kids are our future managers, leaders, officials, decision makers for society. We need our kids to be functioning as best as they can. And I believe every child has a gift for us. So I always encourage you to look for your child's gifts. Look for, what is it they bring? What's their superpower? My son's gift to me was patience. I had to learn patience to deal with tantrums and meltdowns and some other things that he wasn't up to peer level with. So I invite you to assess your child, honor your child, look for their special qualities and the gifts they have for you. All right, I'll be putting this in a reel with some links to some of the things I talked about. So thank you so much for joining and staying. Appreciate you, and have a great day. Take care.